Today, we're diving into one of the most intense and significant figures in all of Islamic eschatology, Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. His very name hints at a strange paradox, a figure who promises salvation but delivers the ultimate deception. And to really get a sense of the scale here, just listen to this prophetic tradition. This isn't just another end times villain. We're talking about the single greatest test, the greatest fitna that humanity will ever face. I mean, the stakes just don't get any higher than that. So who exactly is this great deceiver? Well, Islamic traditions actually give us a surprisingly detailed profile, full of signs meant to act as a warning for those who are paying attention. Okay, let's start with his name, because it tells you almost everything you need to know. Al-Masih al-Dajjal. Al-Masih means the Messiah, the Savior, but al-Dajjal means the deceiver, the liar. So right there in his title, you have this chilling contradiction, the deceitful Messiah. He's gonna look like a savior, but his entire being is built on a lie. And the traditions get really specific with his physical description. He's said to be one-eyed, or more accurately, both of his eyes are defective. One is blind and bulges out like a floating grape. But here's the most important sign. Written right there on his forehead, between his eyes, will be the letters KFR, standing for kafir or disbeliever. And it's said that this sign will be visible to every single believer, even if they can't read. These aren't just random details. They're meant to be unmistakable physical warnings so that no one can be tricked. So who's gonna fall for this? The traditions actually mention some specific groups, like a large following from Isfahan in modern-day Iran. But his appeal is supposed to be much broader than that. He'll attract people who are ignorant, people who are easily swayed, and anyone who gets mesmerized by the sheer spectacle of his power. The warning is that his influence is going to cut right across society. And that brings us to the whole point of his existence, the great trial, the fitna. See, this isn't a test of your physical strength. It's a test of your faith, when you're staring down overwhelming, seemingly divine power. Which leads to the big question, right? If the signs are so obvious, disbeliever is literally written on his forehead, how on earth could so many people be deceived by him? Well, the answer lies in the incredible abilities he's going to have. He's going to wield power that looks, for all the world, like it's coming from God. He'll tell the sky to rain, and it'll rain. He'll make barren land fertile overnight. The world's treasures will literally follow him around like a swarm of bees. And then, and this is the most shocking part, he will kill a man in front of a crowd, slice him in two, and then bring him back to life. He'll even use demons to take the form of your dead parents, who will then appear to you and say, "Son, daughter, follow this man, he is your Lord." You see, these aren't just parlor tricks. These are things designed to completely shatter your faith. That the absolute core of his deception is this great illusion. He will come with what he calls his paradise and his hell. The trick is, his paradise is actually a burning fire, and his hell is actually cool, refreshing water. The test is whether you'll trust what your own eyes are telling you, or whether you'll trust God's guidance and walk into what looks like flames to find salvation. Now, one of the most fascinating and vivid accounts of the Dajjal doesn't come from a prophecy about the future. It comes from a really strange and compelling story from the past. This story comes from a man named Tamim al-Dari. He was a Christian sailor who, after converting to Islam, told this incredible story directly to the Prophet Muhammad, who then shared it with all of his followers. So Tamim and his crew were lost at sea for a whole month when their ship washed up on this remote, unknown island. And the first thing they meet is this creature, a beast so hairy they couldn't tell its front from its back. And then this beast, which calls itself Al-Jassasa, which means the spy, it speaks to them. It doesn't attack them. Instead, it tells them to go to a nearby monastery because there's a man inside who is desperate for news from the outside world. So they hurry over to this monastery, and inside they find this incredible sight. The biggest man they had ever seen in their lives, shackled from neck to ankle in heavy iron chains. This chained man immediately starts firing questions at them. He asks if the date palms of a place called Bisan are still producing fruit. He asks if the Lake of Tiberias still has water. And then he asks the most important question. He asks about the prophet of the unlettered, Muhammad, and what he's done. When the sailors tell him that Yes, the palms are bearing less fruit, the lake is drying up, and the prophet has appeared and is succeeding. The man makes a chilling announcement. He says, I am the Dajjal, and it is almost time for me to be released.
So this story really anchors the Dajjal in a kind of physical reality. He's not just an idea, he's a being waiting for his moment. So how does this all finally end?
According to the prophecies, he'll emerge from the east and travel the world for 40 days. But this is a period where time itself gets distorted. The first day will feel like a year, the second like a month, the third like a week, and then the rest will be normal. His reign of deception ends with the second coming of Isa, or Jesus, who will descend on a white minaret in Damascus. Jesus will then hunt down the Dajjal, finally catching him at the gate of Lud. And it's said that the moment the Dajjal sees Jesus, he'll just begin to dissolve, like salt and water. The story is incredibly detailed, right? But what does it all mean, and how are believers actually supposed to protect themselves from a deception this powerful? Now, it's important to know there are different ways of looking at this. Mainstream Sunni and Shia traditions take it literally. The Dajjal is a real, physical, one-eyed person who will appear. But there are other views, like in the Ahmadiyya movement, that see the Dajjal more symbolically, not as one man, but as a system, a collective of nations that represent materialism and godlessness. So what's the game plan for protection? The guidance is pretty clear. First, hold on tight to your faith and knowledge. Second, actively pray to be protected from his trial. Third, memorize and recite the first 10 verses of the 18th chapter of the Quran, called Surah Al-Kahf. And finally, there's some very practical advice. If you hear he has appeared, do not go to see him. Run, flee, stay as far away as you possibly can. And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. The Dajjal represents the ultimate challenge of telling truth from lies, and his story forces us to ask a question that feels more relevant today than ever before, in our own world of deepfakes and misinformation. When you are faced with dazzling illusions that challenge everything you think you know, how do you hold on to what's real?